afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, and welcome to everyone joining us today. My name is Shayla Favor, and I serve as the Chair of City Council's Housing Committee, and I'd like to officially call this hearing to order. Today, I'm co-hosting this hearing with my colleagues to provide an update on the remainder of Council's housing initiatives, and the Department of Development has a policy proposal that they will be presenting as well. It's no secret that Columbus and our region is growing. Every day, 40 people move into the city of Columbus. While this growth creates wonderful opportunities for our residents, with it also comes challenges, housing being one of those. Currently, we do not have the housing stock to support this growth. We are alarmingly underbuilding housing units at all price points. If we fail to keep up with the housing demand, we will price people out of the communities they've called home for generations. This cannot be the story of Columbus. This council firmly stands in our belief that housing is a human right. Every resident in the city of Columbus deserves safe, stable housing without cost being a burden. That is why in March of this year, Council announced a robust housing policy package to help create new units, preserve existing units, and strengthen housing rights. As of July, we have passed 6 of the policies, which included retaliatory action, home ownership opportunities providing targeted down payment assistance and housing counseling services for first-time home buyers, third-party payment and pay to stay, which allows a tenant an affirmative defense to an eviction action filed on the basis of non-payment of rent. The owner-occupied initiative, which provides home repair for the senior population. And last but certainly not least, legal representation at eviction court, ensuring that folks have legal representation. If you have any questions on those specific initiatives, please visit www.housingforallcbus.com, and the contact information for each office is listed, or you can reach out to my legislative aide, Sandeepti Jindal, at snjindal@columbus.com. I also think it's important for us to level set. These policies alone will not fix the housing crisis, and they alone are not intended to. But they are tools in the toolbox and provides tangible solutions to further protect tenants, build pathways to home ownership, and increase the housing stock in our city. For this hearing, we will focus on the remaining initiatives, and each council member will provide you with an update. Followed by that, we will hear from the Director of Development, Director Michael Stevens, who will be presenting on the administration's proposed Columbus Housing Community Reinvestment Policy. After that, we will hear from the 8 public speakers. With that, I'd like to now turn it over to Council President Hardin and provide an opportunity to share any open remarks.
Thank you, Chair Favor, and really appreciative to co-chair this meeting with you. You know, as Councilmember Favor said, we're here to discuss elements of the housing policy agenda the Council put forward last March under the leadership of Chair Favor, and some of the additional items that have come up during the year affecting our residents. So we want to start with a brewing housing crisis discovered recently, where we've had an estimated 850 residents at Colonial Village, apartments on Columbus's east side facing conditions that the community is working to assist with. We've asked the Department of Development to begin tonight with an update on how we are taking care of these families. And so thank you, Director Stevens, Director Jones, for being here. Certainly we've seen some coverage about the situation at Colonial Village, but could you give us all an update on where things stand?
Good afternoon, President Hardin, President Pro Tem Dorans, Chair Favor, and members of Council. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you this afternoon. During a required evaluation of the units at this property, it was discovered that there was a very large number of families who were occupying units that we had determined were supposed to remain vacant. Upon discovering that these units were occupied, code enforcement was asked to do a full census of the property. They were accompanied by interpreters in order to fully assess the condition of the units and get a clear picture of the families who were residing there. As you mentioned, President Hardin, the census revealed that the apartment complex was home to approximately 800 individuals, of which the majority identified their country of origin as Haiti. From there, the City of Columbus quickly mobilized to engage with community partners, including Legal Aid, CRIS, Us Together, the Guadalupe Center, Mid-Ohio Food Collaborative, Franklin County Jobs and Family Services, and various healthcare providers to schedule a series of events that would allow us to engage with these families directly and connect them with much-needed benefits and services. We held open houses this past Thursday and Friday at the Barnett Recreation Center, and through these events, we were able to see over 280 individuals served. We were able to get 52 of those families enrolled in WIC, offer 111 immunizations. We distributed 83 car and booster seats. We enrolled 15 families in home visiting and were able to provide 96 medical exams, including for 4 pregnant women as well, who at that point had little or no prenatal care. While property management has been able to resolve all of those violations related to working smoke detectors, which is one of our critical life safety issues, the violations for no heat remain outstanding for the most part as of today. The Department of Neighborhoods has been coordinating the donation and delivery of blankets and winter weather clothing as we continue to see the temperature change in our community. We have also begun our initial relocation efforts for these families. We have focused on moving families who are in units with no heat and have children under the age of 1 year old. We have reached out to those families to offer temporary housing options while they work with area providers through their legal immigration services. We anticipate submitting legislation in early December for this council's consideration to allocate additional resources for a larger relocation effort in partnership with the county and the Community Shelter Board. We will continue to prioritize the units with no heat that house children, seniors, and those with health issues. I thank you in advance for your consideration of this legislation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Director, for the update. And certainly, we as a community are concerned about the conditions that these new residents will be are in right now, especially as the weather changes. And so, just as we think about what the city can do during the next couple months, what will this look like in terms of this first support in terms of relocation? Is there a time frame? What is the issue that we are
Sure.
the most pressing issue that we are?
I think the most pressing issue is staying in front of the weather.
Yeah.
We have a lot of vulnerable families right now, and as we all know, when you are in a place of trauma and stress, it is very hard to focus on what you need to do to stabilize your family. We have a lot of families who were taken advantage of, who were put where they were under false pretenses.
Mm-hmm.
So for the first 13 families, again, we consider those the most vulnerable because of the age of the children. We are actively working to move them. Then we will go to the next round of families. The idea being that once they are empowered to engage with legal aid, CRIS, and others to determine work visas, documentation issues, that they can be able to actually contribute and want to engage in a meaningful way in this community because they have not had an opportunity to do so. So for us, it is really, it is really looking at trying to have folks off of the property who need to be within the first weeks of December.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions from my colleagues? Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Director Jones. I just want to check in. We know that Colonial Village has, for the last few years, been in environmental court. Do we have a status or an update on that case as it is today?
Yes, I believe that the city attorney's office, I was just seeing, oh, Laura was here. I don't know if you want to answer, Laura, before I say anything. Okay. The city attorney's office is actively working with the receiver and the lender from the accountability front to ensure that they are held responsible for the negligence that occurred. I know that any relocation efforts that come at the cost of the city and the county will become a part of the environmental court case moving forward.
Thank you.
Just one question. I know you alluded to, but can you talk about, in this specific case, I think we're dealing with a population of folks that are undocumented or have to work through that process as well. Can you talk about how that may complicate any of our efforts as far as benefits that one may be traditionally entitled to, whether it be SNAP and those kinds of things?
So I will do the best based on the knowledge that I have and that I have gained through this process. I'm kind of looking at Councilmember Barosa de Padilla because I wanted to stop me if I start talking out of turn. What I would say is we have, in conversation, determined that the majority of them are asylum seekers who we believe to mostly be in parole status. When you are in parole status, you do have the ability to work in our community and you have the ability to utilize state and federal benefits. However, there are a series of benchmarks that must be met during that time frame. And that's really where Legal Aid, CRIS, Us Together, Jewish Family Services are all critical partners, because we don't want these families to miss the appointments that need to be scheduled, the check-ins with court, and other things that ensure that they are able to get the documentation they need in order to access everything in our community. And we don't believe that was happening at Colonial Village because the mail service doesn't work. They were put in units that weren't supposed to be occupied. They don't have keys to open their postal boxes, that type of stuff.
Thank you, Director. Thank you for that update. With that, I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Council President Hardin. And I will just take a moment to publicly extend our appreciation. This is really the definition of meeting the moment. There were a countless number of agencies, both at the city and the county level, that came together in a very short amount of time to provide care and resources and a little level of confidence to folks who don't speak our language, are not familiar, and definitely are not interested in having their lives being a part of a political volleyball, if you will. And so I just want to extend that appreciation for the work that you all have done in collaboration with other agencies across the county to support our new residents. Now I'd like to go ahead and jump into our presentations. Our first, we will hear an update on vacant and foreclosure registry by Council President Pro Tem Dorans.
Thank you, Chair Favor. Before I begin an update on the vacant and foreclosure registry legislation, I just want to thank the Council President, Chair Favor, the administration for being here today to talk about this important topic. And also, it is refreshing to see so many members of our community being out for a public hearing on housing today. So thank you for everyone who's in attendance and certainly engaged on this issue. We all know, as we've talked about here today and outside these chambers, Columbus has a significant need for housing. And one of the aims of these pieces of legislation is to incentivize owners and lenders to turn these properties back into productive housing units for families across Columbus to call home. We also believe that these pieces of legislation will allow for our code enforcement team here at the city to ensure that these properties are upkept and do not detract from existing neighborhoods and become a blight on their community. So with that, I'd like to move to the PowerPoint. Mark? Thank you. First, regarding the vacancy registration, this will establish, here we go. This will establish a registry for vacant properties in Columbus, which will be held by the Department of Building, Zoning and Services. We have defined a vacant building by Columbus City Code, section 4501.42, which is a dwelling or dwelling unit which is not occupied as a home, residence, or sleeping place for one person or persons under a lease, rental agreement, or permission of an owner, or 2, any building or structure that is not being used for any purpose, or 3, a dwelling or dwelling unit that has been ordered vacant or becomes vacant by virtue of being declared unfit for habitation by a code enforcement official. Those properties that fall within this category will be subject to a fee and be placed on a registry. The establishing a fund will be created by this legislation that will be managed by the Department of Building and Zoning Services, which will support ongoing efforts to help bring properties back into code compliance. And I think that's a real important point here, to generate funds to make sure that these properties, again, do not detract from their neighborhoods. This legislation will ensure that owners of vacant properties are known in the city and can be reached if necessary, either by the city or another party. Ensures that owners of vacant properties are aware of their obligations of ownership under the Columbus City Codes, and ensure owners meet minimum standards for maintenance of their property. We are currently working with stakeholders and having those meetings now, and hope to have this legislation come before council before the end of the year. Regarding who would need to register, owners of record of properties that meet the definition as previously outlined. There will be several exemptions that are in the legislation, including vacant buildings that are subject to an active probate case, Vacant buildings are in the first year of building's vacancy, provided the property owner is actively seeking to have the vacant property occupied, as demonstrated as acts such as a listing for property, sale, or lease. Vacant buildings that are subject of a valid permit issued for a short-term rental. Vacant buildings have an active building permit on file with the city, or vacant buildings that are owned by a local, regional, or state land bank. Want to move on to the next piece of legislation regarding our foreclosure registry. This will establish a registry for properties that are subject to a foreclosure action held by the Department of Building and Zoning Services. This registry will apply to properties, whether vacant or occupied, that is or has been subject to the following. One, an ongoing foreclosure action by a mortgagor or a trustee. Has been the subject of a foreclosure action by a mortgagor or a trustee and a judgment has been entered. Or three, has been the subject of a foreclosure sale with a title transfer to the beneficiary of mortgage involved in the foreclosure, or any properties transferred under a deed in lieu of a foreclosure sale. Those properties that meet those standards will have to register. Mortgagees, mortgage servicing companies, and lenders who hold foreclosure or foreclosure properties in the city of Columbus will have to file. This piece of legislation will establish a registration program as a mechanism to keep and protect neighborhoods from becoming blighted through the lack of adequate maintenance on properties that are subject to a foreclosure action. Establish a mechanism to avert foreclosure actions through a timely intervention, education, or counseling of property owners in our community. We are hoping that this legislation will also come before council before the end of the year. However, we are having additional stakeholder meetings with folks right now. Again, the hope for both of these pieces of legislation is, one, to make sure that we're aware of where these properties exist in the city of Columbus, and then to make sure that those properties are being held up to the same code requirements of everyone else to ensure that these properties do not become, again, a blight on their neighborhood, encouraging public safety issues or otherwise, and then ultimately to incentivize property owners to ensure that these buildings become productive pieces of property back in our community. And that means ensuring that families can call those homes into the future. And with that, certainly happy to answer any questions from my colleagues about either the contents of legislation or the progress at this point. Seeing none, I'd be happy to.
Oh, Council President.
Council President?
Not really a question. Just want to thank you as you work through these pieces of legislation. Everybody on this dais knows that I value process as much as I do individual legislation and policy, and it's just so that we are doing the due diligence of talking to everyone who may be impacted by anything that we consider on this dais. And so I want to thank you for the process that you are underway with right now. The partners and have obviously through your discussion this evening, but also in updates that you've given me, certainly shown the need for this legislation. So we look forward to it coming before us.
Thank you, Council President. And just a note, I think one of the things on that side of things is we've tried to build this legislation and working through existing processes within the city as it currently exists. We've identified probably thousands of properties that will fall within either one of these registries. And to think again, when we're talking about the housing needs that exist in the city of Columbus right now, and to think we have thousands and thousands of properties that would qualify either vacant or under this foreclosure registry, and think about how many residents could be calling those units home. I think that's one of the real reasons why we want to bring this forward, to one, maintain the support that those properties don't bring down other properties in the neighborhood, but again, to incentivize those owners to bring those units back online. Because we know right now, we're talking about thousands of units. We know that families could use those right now, and the hope is that both these pieces of legislation will certainly incentivize that moving forward. But with that, certainly happy to turn the floor back over to Chair Favor.
Well, thank you, President Pro Tem. Just a question. You acknowledge where the money could potentially go right now that would be generated from the fees. First of all, could you dive just a little bit deeper into what that could potentially look like and how it would support residents? And do we have an idea of what that fee could be just for landowners who could be thinking that this could be a punitive measure?
Yep. Thank you, Chair Favor. I think one of the things that we are still working out with the legislation is exactly where those funds are going to be held. Typically, with any type of fee that's being levied, there needs to be a nexus between the fee that is being levied and sort of the activities that it's funding. So I think primarily, first of all, the fee will help generate the funds necessary to enforce the piece of the legislation. As we've talked about, our code enforcement team, I think, does a good job across the city of Columbus, working with property owners to try and bring them into compliance to make sure that that they know what's expected of them. But then also, we also know that there are property owners in Columbus that would love to be in compliance with code, but maybe don't have the funds themselves in order for that to happen. And I think that is also something we're actively exploring about how potentially those funds can be utilized in order to help support some of those activities, particularly for, a very common example we've heard is, we'll have a family member that will inherit a house from a family member who's unfortunately passed away. They don't really know what to do with it. They may not have the sophistication to put it on the market. There may be active code issues with it right now. One of the ideas around, again, the funds being generated here, how can we help them get in a position where they would be able to put that housing unit back on the market, and also make sure that they're dealing with, reputable folks in our community to make sure that that generational investment actually pays off for that family. Because we all know the horror stories of folks, trying to sell a property, not having the right education behind them, and really being taken for a ride by some more predatory folks in our community. So that's what we're really trying to look at. I think from a funding standpoint for what the fee looks like, we haven't arrived on a specific dollar amount quite yet. I think we're trying to make sure that we're finding a place that, again, supports the requirements of the legislation, certainly incentivizes for folks to move on with that property if they're holding on to it long term, but also at the same time, again, we think about the folks that may be part of one of these registries that may not have the means or support at the current time to have thousands and thousands of dollars of fines over their head. And we're really trying to be thoughtful about how to, when this mechanism gets put in place, how in fact that is going to arrive at the end of the day. And I think those are several of the key issues that we want to work out before the final legislation comes before this body.
Thank you, President Pro Tem. I just think it's incredibly important to underscore that a comprehensive housing policy must include ensuring that we can preserve what has already been designated as affordable in our community and making sure that people can remain safely housed. And unfortunately, 10 so years ago, we had a real vacant property issue in our community. And folks were losing their homes because they either couldn't keep up with repairs or unfortunately they couldn't keep up with the taxes on their property. And so just thinking about the revenue that could potentially be generated from these policies that could help fill the gap for a lot of residents in our community. One of the pieces of legislation that we passed back in June, was the owner-occupied initiative, which I highlighted in my initial remarks, which is a program that is ran through the Columbus City Attorney's Office for individuals who have found themselves in environmental court because they have been unable to keep up with the repairs in their home. And if you have found yourself in environmental court because you cannot keep up with repairs, more than likely you probably don't have those resources at this time to be able to do that. So thinking about how the revenue that could be generated from this policy in the future could help to fill that gap as well.
Yep,
so very
absolutely.
exciting policy. Thank you. Next, we will hear an update from Councilmember Nick Bankston, who is leading the Rental Registry Initiative.
Thank you, Chair Favor, and again, thank you for your leadership in this undertaking. As you know, our office is really spearheading our rental registry efforts, and to date, we have been focused and working with our Legislative Research Office to do comprehensive research that really is comparative and looks at cities around the country and peer cities that have a rental registry and how they function. Our goal is to really come with a solid draft that we can present to key stakeholders in the community and then larger community engagement. Just to remind folks as to why we are looking at this, the rental registry will do a couple things. One, it will give us a clearer picture of our actual rental capacity, something which cannot be gleaned through our existing sources. Many folks have pointed out that we do, in fact, have a rental registry at the county level, but that data is lacking and also is not enforceable. It will allow us to examine trends in rental housing developments across neighborhoods to better be able to address critical issues as they arise. And then critically, it will also establish a sustainable revenue stream to support ongoing tenant-based rental assistance programs, legal advocacy initiatives, and potentially adding additional funding for development and preservation of affordable housing. We do understand, and not only as Chair of Economic Development, but small and minority businesses, that our housing providers and landlords are small businesses. And so we want to take a very strategic approach that ensures that we are balancing, making sure that tenants have access to emergency assistance when needed, but also that we are thinking about this from a housing provider standpoint to ensure that they are in this conversation as well. So as I said, we've been really looking at, again, comparing other cities and what they look like, going over again what our purposes are. Some of the things that we will be rolling out and talking with stakeholders on are, one, the fees associated with the rental registry, what those amounts are, what those caps are, and even what some of those exemptions may be, projected revenue and the allocation of those funds and how they will be used across the city, and then also compliance and enforcement and how we will enforce the actual policy. And so that is really what we have been focused on and look forward to engaging with key stakeholders. And again, those are our community leaders, those are our housing providers. They're also our tenants and current residents right now to get their thoughts and then look forward to a larger community engagement process at the top of the year. And that's all I have. I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Bankston. I will punt the same question over to you for any of our landowners or small business owners that may feel that the policy could be punitive in nature. Do we have an idea of what a fee could potentially look like? And once again, underscoring what it would be supporting.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to note that this is really a tool for our housing providers and for our small businesses. We know that we have unprecedented relief right now in the city from the federal government that helps with emergency assistance. And we do know that the revenue generated from this will not match that, but it will give us an ongoing tool to be able to address emergency assistance needs when necessary, which at the end of the day, one, it keeps a family stable in their home, but also it helps to get to the bottom line of that small business owner. So really, this is a way for us to ensure that we are getting ahead of this surge that we are seeing in our community. There's pressure on our housing market because we do not have enough housing stock. And so in no way is this punitive, but it is in a way for us to say that if we believe in affordable housing, if we believe that housing is a human right, that when you get into the business of providing housing, there are stipulations that come with that. And this is just one of those. One of the things that we are laser focused on, in addition to this being for rental assistance, we are looking at the possibility of this being used as a risk mitigation fund for our housing providers, that if there are major damages done to a property, for instance, that there would be a fund that they could tap into, because it's not only do we want folks being able to afford their rent, we also want them living in quality housing. And so if we can assist with flipping that property, getting it back into productive use, but also making sure that it's quality use for our families, I think that is a critical piece of it as well. And we are looking, of course, at fees, but also capping those. So for some of our larger housing providers in the city, ensuring that we understand that there are some folks that own hundreds, in some cases thousands of units. We want to make sure that it's not something that is, one, going to be punitive to them, or two, passed on to the tenant. And so those are all the things that we are looking at and really looking forward to having that deeper, robust discussion, because at the end of the day, it's about the rubber meeting the road and making sure, again, that we're balancing keeping our family stable and also making sure that we are bringing our housing providers along with us.
Thank you, Councilmember Bankston. You know, that over the last year, we have seen a 40% increase in our homeless population. This is the number one way that we can prevent folks from facing evictions and being unsafely housed in our community, making sure that there is rental assistance dollars. And I could pass the mic over to Deputy Director, who could give us hard numbers on the amount of emergency rental assistance that is still going out the door today. The need is still extremely great in our community. Our housing providers are not shy in letting us know on a weekly basis the wait list that they are continuing to navigate still in this post-pandemic world. And so once again, I just want to highlight why this specific measure is so incredibly important at this time.
And Councilmember, if I could just raise as well, the greater benefit to our community, even though you may be a housing provider that has tenants that may not use this, there's still a net benefit to our community. When I served as President and CEO of Gladden Community House, one of our biggest pillars of work was rental assistance and homelessness prevention. And what I will tell you, the numbers are amazing when you see how many folks miss their rent, not because they're bad tenants or they want to miss their rent. How many folks have missed their rent because they had to get that car fixed to go to work? That the price of daycare went up $50 and they have to make sure that their child has somewhere to go. And providing that relief, that one time, what we saw is roughly 40% to 50% of the folks, we didn't see them again, right? Because that one-time emergency assistance helped give them the breathing room, helped give them the necessary time that they needed to be stable. And we know that when families are stable, we have better education outcomes, we have better employment outcomes because that person can now get to work back and forth, and we have healthier and safer neighborhoods because folks have a sense of community. So at the end of the day, this is, again, keeping someone stably housed saves our community money, right? On average, it costs us $2,300 to keep someone in their home. But if they get into the shelter system and we have to get them back into housing, it's costing us on average $9,600. Now, those numbers that I just gave you are 2018 numbers, pre-pandemic numbers. So they're much even higher now. And so I think that's something to keep in mind, that this benefits all of us directly and indirectly.
Thank you for making that point, Council Member. I will now share an update on the ADU pilot being led by Councilmember Emmanuel Remy, who unfortunately was not able to be here with us today. Accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, allows communities to increase the housing supply, provide financial stability for owners through passive income, and can be leveraged to increase affordable housing. ADUs can positively impact a number of Columbus residents, including aging residents looking to downsize but stay in their neighborhood, retirees on fixed incomes needing extra income to cover their mortgage, homeowners looking for real estate investments, young professionals without families, and people with disabilities that can have their own living space but still be close to family support. Overall, the ADUs will increase the supply of studio and one-bedroom options in Columbus, which is critical as we are facing a supply and demand issue. This program will be a pilot in the South Side, the Linden, and Hilltop neighborhoods. For applicants accepted into the pilot program, they will receive a financial incentive equal to 30% of the square footage development costs. In return, the applicant will agree to an affordability covenant, maximum of 120% of the area median income for a period of 15 years. ADUs are required to be on owner-occupied land and cannot be used for short-term rentals. The ADU pilot will aim to develop 20 to 25 newly constructed units using a mixture of all design templates. We are working currently with Jonathan Barnes, architecture and design firm, to develop a manual that will walk pilot program participants through the process. The manual includes floor plans, financial institutions that have ADU financing products, contacts with the city, within the city planning department for any questions that may arise, and more. We anticipate this pilot application will open in Q1 of next year. For any questions, please reach out to Councilmember Remy's legislative assistant, Kaylin Pittman at cdpittman@columbus.gov. Are there any questions from my colleagues at this time? I will just say I'm very excited for this pilot product to come online. You know, we talk a lot about a variety of housing units to meet the moment in Columbus, and that can't just only be single-family development. It can't only just be multifamily. We've got to look at other unique ways to bring housing online to really reach our growing population, our aging population, and folks who are just looking for unique solutions, unique housing solutions in Columbus. So I'm very excited to have this one come online.
I would just say, Chair, that it's actually a throwback to how communities used to house, specifically to the neighborhood that you and I used to live in. I used to live in, where you had multiple generations living on the same property, be that in carriage homes or. But as we continue this conversation, specifically around the corridors, around densifying, having these other units that maybe have your aging mother live on property with you are just things that I think are going to be more commonplace in a city like Columbus as we continue to grow. So I love it as well. I'm really excited about this pilot.
Absolutely. And once again, for folks who may not be impressed by the number of folks that would be a part of the initial pilot program, we have to always keep in mind that there is no silver bullet to solving our housing crisis in our community. We have got to utilize all tools in the toolbox, and that includes creative solutions like an ADU pilot program. All right, so I will also share an update on another measure that we introduced back in March around rent increase notification, which is being led by my office. This legislation would require that any rental agreement or renewal for a rental unit must require at least a 180-day notice when the monthly rental price will be increasing upon renewal. This notification is critical in allowing tenants who cannot afford the increased rent price more time to find suitable replacement or access to funds to stay in that unit. At this time, we have no legislation written and are looking towards a Q1 of 2024 to start stakeholder engagement. We understand that this legislation has many differing opinions, and we do not want to rush this process. So we will continue to be intentional in our outreach and hearing from all community members before creating this legislation. With that said, we are open to feedback at any time. We have already been receiving some. If you have any feedback, please reach out to my legislative aide, Sandeep Jindo at snjindal@columbus.gov. Now I'd like to turn it over to Council President Hardin to provide an update on wholesaler regulation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to share what my office has been working on in the last couple of months. So we know that a growing share of our properties are being purchased not by working families and first-time home buyers in our community, but by institutional investors or bulk buyers and high-volume landlords, those folks who own at least 500 homes already. About 1 in 5 homes in Franklin County over the last few years, including over 600 single-family properties in the region in just the last 3 months. Let me say that again. 600 single-family homes in the last 3 months have been sold to these big guys. We have a problem in our community. Certainly, a lot of institutional investing is perfectly legitimate, but we hear a lot of stories from advocates, from neighbors, and residents about how it can cause real problems. First, it reduces the inventory of housing stock that regular folks might be able to buy. Secondly, many of these become troublesome properties with bad management. They aren't taken care of. They become hotbeds for code enforcement issues. They contribute to the deterioration of our neighborhoods. So at the city level, we don't have a lot of power to address the larger issue, but at a federal level, Senator Sherrod Brown has proposed cracking down on this issue, as has Senator Louis Blessing at the state level. But how we are trying to address it here in Columbus is through the practice of wholesaling, which we know is a critical link in the funnel of cheap properties being gobbled up. In real estate wholesaling, a wholesaler goes into distressed neighborhoods, often preying on communities of color or seniors, maybe those who are struggling to pay their taxes, and offers them a lowball offer. This is where those harassing "Can I buy your house?" text and phone calls comes from. Predatory wholesalers often misrepresent themselves as a realtor and use high-pressure sales tactics to acquire these homes. Once they get a seller's home under contract, they find an interested investor to buy it. The wholesaler then assigns their rights in the contract to the buyer at a higher price than the price contracted with the seller and keeps that profit. They are essentially the middleman to match investors, buyers with sellers. So we know very few other cities and states have gone after wholesaling. Definitions of it vary a lot. It takes advantage of loopholes in laws, and data is hard to come by since wholesalers and their partners use a range of different LLCs to obscure and hide their tracks. But we're committed to tackling this predatory issue. Moving forward, we're looking at a number of routes to address this problem. We're looking at how we can prohibit wholesaling or license with minimum standards. We're looking at mandatory disclosures so that buyers know the person they're talking to isn't a realtor and can access resources on the full value of their home. And we're also looking at regulating the misleading mass marketing that wholesalers do. So if someone in your family or neighborhood has experience with wholesaling, we'd love to hear from you. This is, a part of the policy making process. We're hearing from residents about your unique experiences in this space would be helpful. We are working closely with the city attorney's office, with my colleagues, with community stakeholders to make sure that even more so than legislation, we get at the issue and figure out how we can do our best here in Columbus to protect individual families, but also protect the market to make it, to continue to take away giving an upper hand to the big guys. And again, a lot of these folks are not even from here. They're from out of state and making these investments, making it harder on our community. So we look forward to bringing something forward. I love to publicly say dates and time frames when we think that we can get something. First quarter, we will have something very shortly.
Council President.
Yes.
So I think this is an opportunity for us to highlight my goal as the chair of this committee to work in partnership with stakeholders, with residents, with landlords, with realtors. This idea was brought to us by the folks in our realtors community, and they recognized the predatory behavior that was occurring widespread, and elevated it to us as something that we needed to prioritize. And so when you think that your legislators are not paying attention, we are absolutely paying attention to those ideas and solutions that you're bringing towards us.
Thank you so much for bringing that forward. It certainly is that partnership, and it also reminded me that the piece of legislation where we started looking first were peer communities who had tried to tackle this issue. Well, a lot of us just got back from the National League of Cities, working with our colleagues in cities around the country. We were following the lead, or examining closely what Philadelphia has done in this space, and using that as a guide for where we go from here. So folks who are interested in potentials, look what Philadelphia was able to do. That's certainly where my office is spending a lot of time, is working with their teams about potentials here in Columbus. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, and Council President, I think you're going to kick us off with our CRA discussion as well.
Yeah. All right. In addition to the housing package that Council has been working on, we have been working with the administration on a major proposal they have to revise our residential incentive policy. As we all have heard today, we know that to keep pace with the number of jobs coming to Columbus, the region needs to produce twice as many housing units annually as we do now. Twice as many, just to keep up. Yet we are under the number of homes we are produced even last year. So we need to double, but we have produced less than we did last year. There's an issue here. We consider this a 5-alarm fire when we talk about housing access in our city. We have an issue, and we need to bring every tool to the forefront. Failure to act after years of underbuilding is how it became impossible for middle-class families to live in other high-growth cities. Look up Denver. Call your family and friends in Austin. If we do not change how we do business, specifically about building more housing in our region, we will look and be like these high-growth cities where if you don't make a certain amount of money, you will not be able to live in our city. This is what we are trying to avoid by bringing every tool to the toolbox. Director Stevens, I'm going to ask you to share with us the results of a task force that have been meeting to work on this issue for the last several months. I'll turn it over to Director Stevens.
Good afternoon, President Hardin, Chair Favor, members of council. If it's okay, I have a presentation I'd like to share with you and the audience. Following the 2022 update of the affordability requirements of the residential tax abatement policy, and as part of Council's housing package, the Department of Development was asked to review the administration of the residential tax incentive policy to ensure that it was being applied equitably and reflects the changes in the city's neighborhoods. An internal working group met this year to review how the policy is implemented and found the following challenges. The increase in cost to construct new housing makes the tax incentive a critical tool to make housing projects financially viable, and its application is not expansive enough to meet the need. The application of the policy is inequitable because it focuses the development of housing supply and affordability only in historically disinvested neighborhoods. And the current CRA boundaries do not respond to how the city is changing, nor do they align with other city priorities and investments. The first challenge is we are not building the housing we need to maintain affordability. The mayor has called for the city and the region to double the number of housing units built each year to meet the housing needs of our growing region and make up for the last decade of underbuilding. We will not meet that goal in 2023 and instead will produce fewer housing units than last year. Between 2010 and 2020, the city added 52,528 new households and only 44,491 new houses. This further constrains the housing market, impacting our most vulnerable families most significantly. New housing is limited by two factors: regulatory barriers, which the city is working to reduce by modernizing our zoning code, and our partners in BZS are working to streamline the review of new housing to reduce the time and cost of approval. Cost barriers are a significant factor facing projects in the region. As costs escalate, most notably interest rates, the cost of construction exceeds the revenue, making the project not financially feasible. We focused on the data of the cost barrier and engaged Voigt Strategic Insights, a local firm with expertise in real estate market feasibility, to evaluate the cost of new construction and the anticipated revenue from rents across Franklin County to determine where a 3-story walk-up apartment development was financially feasible. Given these conditions, without the addition of any other support, 3-story walk-up apartment buildings are not financially feasible to build in most of Franklin County. The rents need to overcome the cost of a new project are not high enough in most of Columbus today. Therefore, projects are being shelved or delayed until such a time as the market rents can justify the cost of construction. This is how a number of our peer cities finally managed to accelerate their housing production. They simply waited until the market was so constrained that rents became high enough to justify the cost of construction. That is not an outcome we want in Columbus. Maintaining all other assumptions on the cost of construction, but including an abatement on the investments under the CRA policy, expands the financial feasibility of new residential development across more areas of the city. As council is aware, we are working to modernize our zoning code through the Zone In project. If we are able to pair the tax incentive with the opportunity for more density along the corridors, The land cost on a project can be reduced to just 10% of the project, and many more parts of the county would be feasible for new housing. This shows from left to right what's feasible now without any of the tools I mentioned earlier. The middle slide shows what's financially feasible around housing with the abatement, and the slide on the far right shows the progression if we take these tools and layer them upon each other and use the abatement and add density and through our zoning process, use other tools like the accessory dwelling units that you talked about earlier, Chair Favor. There is a path forward to get to financial feasibility so we can get more projects built. Supply is critical to slowing the rise of housing costs in the city, but meeting the market needs is also important to a healthy, functioning housing market. Today, there are too few units affordable to our most vulnerable families, those whose household incomes are below $18,000 a year. But there are also too few units in the city for the families with household incomes exceeding $72,000 a year. This is an issue because those households will simply move down in the housing ladder to secure housing, further pressuring the families on the lower end of the spectrum and limiting the available housing that is affordable to them. The city continues to address the needs of our most vulnerable families and has this year allocated more than $63 million to reduce evictions, keep low-income homeowners in their homes, and support those in our community experiencing homelessness. The first $50 million from the 2022 Affordable Housing Bond was included in this year's capital budget to build the deeply affordable units these families need. The second challenge is the availability of the tool is limited to only the portions of the city which were historically disinvested in, and since new construction of both market rate and affordable housing require the incentive to make a project viable, the outcome of new housing and new affordable housing are focused only in those areas. This map shows the median household income in each census tract that is above the city's median income of $58,700 a year. The abatement areas, as they are drawn today, are located nearly exclusively in the census tracts where the median income is below the city's median income. This is a map of all tax credit affordable housing projects built in the city between 2000 and 2020. Those projects lie almost exclusively within existing CRA boundaries, and because these projects are not feasible without access to the residential tax incentive, the projects will continue to be concentrated in these areas. The requirements of the Ohio Housing Finance Agency to be awarded tax credits is biased towards projects in opportunity-rich areas of the city, and therefore our tool does not align with those priorities, making it even more difficult to secure these credits and get the affordable housing in Columbus. Our third challenge is the current CRA boundaries do not reflect current market conditions in our neighborhoods and are not aligned with other city priorities and investments. The existing CRA boundaries were drawn many years ago and reflect market conditions that have changed greatly. The size of some of the older areas are very large and stretch across neighborhoods. Because of the affordability requirements are based on the distress criteria of the areas, these overly large CRAs result in designations that do not reflect what we intuitively know about some of our neighborhoods. For example, Franklinton CRA stretches west into the hilltop neighborhoods and therefore is designated as a ready for opportunity, which does not align with the market in East Franklinton today. The current CRA boundaries do not align with other city projects. As an investment is made in more robust transit, we want to ensure that the tools are available to include affordability along the Link-Us corridors. Equally important is to leverage the updates to the zoning code with access to the residential tax incentive to ensure that densities needed can be achieved along those corridors and that affordability is included. Finally, aligning housing incentives with where the city is focused on job creation allows housing, and especially affordable housing, nearby those opportunities. We need to ensure that in expanding access to the residential tax incentives, there's no harm caused to other key initiatives like infrastructure improvements funded by TIFs. Based on the review of how the policy is applied, given the needs of our changing city, expanding the map more broadly ensures it is effective at helping build the new housing we need and expanding access to affordable housing throughout the city of Columbus, not just in these outdated CRA boundaries. The proposal extends the availability of tools to the municipal boundaries of the city of Columbus, similar to the way the policy is administered in both Cleveland and Cincinnati today, with the exception of existing TIF agreements, existing legacy community reinvestment areas, and existing commercial community reinvestment areas. Current CRA boundaries would be eliminated. We would no longer refer to the Southside CRA or the Franklinton CRA. Instead, those would be replaced by a single Columbus Housing CRA. This would create a predictable and consistent process. Affordable housing partners could remove the legislative process from the hurdles required to get their project across the finish line if they have the opportunity to build affordable housing outside the existing boundaries. It also allows the tool to be available to our emerging developers. The size of their projects would limit their ability to support the cost and time to access the incentive which they will need to get their projects built. Since the affordability requirements were updated in 2022 and we are scheduled to review them in 2025, changes to those requirements were not considered. In conclusion, by extending the availability of the CRA to other areas of Columbus, we effectively spur housing production while maximizing one of our most powerful inclusion tools. Expanding the CRA map is a proactive step to foster economic inclusion in Columbus's opportunity-rich neighborhoods. Extending the map to new areas will attract investment and development, creating more housing supply at a time when Columbus needs it most. And expanding CRA availability demonstrates Columbus's commitment to equitable development across the city. Our affordable housing partners are relying on this expansion to help Columbus meet the demand better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director. Earlier in your presentation, you were basically setting it up that there are really just two choices when you are looking at growing product in a market where incentives are needed. You brought up the example of Austin and how the other way is just falling back, letting the market get so expensive that the cost to rent out an apartment will cover whatever a developer would need to do to get a loan for that type of product. What that reminded me of was, I sit on the large city council president's council for the top 20 cities in the country. And last year I was talking to the council president of Austin, and she told me about her point-in-time count with homelessness being at 2,500. And she said out loud to me in private that their issue of homelessness is almost unsolvable now. And so, yeah, they can now build a lot of housing, but they have so much more homeless issues because the market has priced so many working people out of housing in their community. And so, folks don't always enjoy the conversation around incentivizing building and incentivizing, but I think that we as a community have to make grown-up decisions about what is best for our residents now, but what is best for our residents 10 years from now. And if we don't double down on how we're building, then we will have issues that will impact us even further down. So not just housing affordability, but our homelessness issues as well. Would you talk about how our current policy may not be the most equitable in terms of where we have built our affordability in the market right now, based off of the census tracts of how we do CRAs as we at the current moment?
Yeah, thank you, President Hardin. And earlier in the presentation, I showed some of the areas of the map where we were seeing some of our tax credit projects being built. And they are being concentrated in areas of the city that have the CRA districts, but they're not being spread out across all of our communities. So we're not seeing mixed income neighborhoods, which we know are strong for building the fabric of a community. We're not seeing opportunities for individuals making between $30,000 and $80,000 to live in areas where it's easier to access the jobs that are in this community. It's an unintended consequence. We are not trying to create a density of poverty in any one area or ask any one area of our community to bear the burden around affordable housing. I think it serves all our neighborhoods and the region as a whole if we can spread that out. And we talk a lot about this as well, that the housing crisis burden is not Columbus's burden alone. It is a regional burden. And I think everything we can do and all the tools we can use to rise up to that challenge and produce the units that are needed in the neighborhoods that people want to live in and close to jobs and opportunity is the best approach.
I have more questions, but I'll open it up for my colleagues. Chair, favor?
Well, you know I have questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Director, you mentioned, you spent some time talking about the feasibility of certain areas without the policy, with the policy. Just so that everyone's operating on the same page, what is the definition of feasibility that the department is operating on?
So it's financial feasibility, and that is the ability that the revenue generated from the project will pay the cost to build the project. So we, on these assumptions, were all based on just the ability for the developer of the project to go to the bank and get the financing needed to construct the loan.
And for folks who could be concerned that, well, what is the return on the investment for the developer and engaging in such a project? Are we accounting for 20% returns or 5% returns?
That's not included in our calculations at all. So this is all on the financial feasibility of working with the bank to make the loan requirements to get funded there. So we have not, if we add that, it makes it even more challenging to become financially feasible.
But we are taking your point into consideration. We are not looking to support an egregious amount of return on one's investment in presenting this policy to the community. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes, Chair Favor, that's very accurate. The intent here is not to build profits. The intent here is to produce enough revenue that it makes sense to pursue the cost of construction, and those developers are able to repay the cost to the banks on the loans they take, and get more units built so we just don't let the market drive a rent rate so it hits a level that's acceptable for the funding partners.
Thank you. I'm not sure if you can get to the point in your slide where you had the actual numbers that talk about how many properties have been constructed based upon the policy, I think beginning in 2018, if we could get there for folks.
That's the one, sorry.
And I think this is a very important slide because of the narrative that everything in Columbus is abated. And what this slide details is that that is inaccurate, that we're looking about from what is constructed in totality, perhaps 20% or so that has been constructed that would have fallen under this policy.
Actually, we're of the total parcels within the city of Columbus, 3% are abated. What we have found since 2018, when we put forth a policy that aligned with their priorities around affordability, we started out at a 20% set aside around affordable. We have seen close to 30% of all those new units that took advantage of this incentive policy were affordable. So we exceeded the number that was targeted on the set aside. And I think it's really important to emphasize, we're not updating the policy that council approved last year. If you want to take advantage of this incentive and utilize this tool, you need to commit to providing affordable units in the project. So affordable units means you need to be providing units that people will be making between $50,000 and $80,000 a year, depending on the size of their household, but approximately $50,000 to $80,000 a year are not paying more of that 30% of that income to housing. So we're asking, if you want to take advantage of this tool as a developer, that you set aside at least 20% of those units to meet that 50 to 80 range. If you want to go deeper, if you set aside 30% of that, of those units, you can go a little bit higher on the income qualified folks you're serving. It's more close to the 80,000, but it's just getting more affordable units and meeting that number. And I'll go back to one slide that there's all these maps. I apologize. We're going to get to the right one. Nope. That one. It shows there's, individuals who you're making $18,000 and less a year, there's not enough housing for them, and a lot of that's the permanent supportive housing. But then those individuals who are, at 70,000 and higher, there's not enough housing available at the price point that they can afford available. So having these units built is really critical.
Absolutely. And you led me right to my next question. We have some advocates here from BRED who advocate for those in our community who are 30% of the area median income and below, which generally falls in our permanent supportive housing category. More often than not, those projects are not built without LIHTC support. Would this policy be beneficial for those folks that would fall in that area median income category?
Most definitely, especially as we're trying to align the policy with the requirements of the Ohio Housing Finance Agency, or OFA, as we like to say. And, they have made it clear they want these projects in opportunity-rich areas of communities and cities, and by having this availability and this tool, because our affordable housing developers who do the LIHTC deals will tell you this is part of that capital stack that they need. The abatement is they need to do a project. So having that available in other areas of our community is going to make them more competitive for those LIHTC projects.
Thank you. Let me share the room.
Director, I just want to clarify a couple of things, but in our current policy that we just updated last year, there's still the three different statuses that apply. How will that apply citywide?
So thank you, Councilmember Bankston. By going to this, making this administrative change and updating the map to capture more of the city, we will drill down more in the census tract area. So the Franklinton CRA example I shared earlier, that means in East Franklinton, down that census tract, that will move from a ready to opportunity category to a market ready. So the affordability requirements and other parts of that policy will then apply to that specific area. So it helps us drill down and deliver an affordability requirement better aligned with the area that the project is going into.
So instead of these larger, community areas that we've come up with that are maybe, say, from the past, we're able to more pinpoint, I should say, census tracts that are seeing significant growth, although maybe in the same neighborhood, completely different, maybe a mile or less away, that we want to get deeper affordability in those. So again, this doesn't want to apply to anyone that's developing. If you want to develop and you want to apply for an incentive, you have to follow those criteria, correct?
Yes, sir. I want to make perfectly clear, we're not asking for any change in the policy that was updated in 22, except we want to make that administrative change around the map, but the requirements around affordability are still in place.
Yeah, and I think it's just, I want to underscore that because this is not an automatic process. And oftentimes we hear a narrative that when you move something like this, I think folks' natural reaction would be like, oh, well, you're just giving tax incentives to anybody that builds anything new in the city. That is not the case. You would have to apply and you would still have to adhere to these affordability benchmarks. So I just want to make sure that is underscored and uplifted, especially when you look at that only that 3.1% of the parcels in the city are abated, because there is a process that goes into that abatement and incentive process. And just to, I think, refresh everyone here, and thanks to Chair Favor, that loophole that once existed around single-family homes is now also tied to affordability, because we want to ensure that folks, based off their income, are able to get into some of our most prized neighborhoods, but also get into home ownership. And so I want to thank, of course, Councilmember Rosa de Padilla for her leadership on advancing home ownership options as well.
I've been preserving my voice since I lost it last week, so I've been unusually quiet during this hearing. But I wanted to, can you tell us a little bit about what the reporting and monitoring process will look like? So we talked a little bit about, when we look at abatements and how we monitor if this is actually getting us the results that we want. Right? So this is a different strategy, making it more of an opportunity all around the city so that we can build more housing. How are we going to let folks know if this is actually working, and when can we course correct if it's not?
Thank you, Councilmember Rosa de Padilla. We are not changing the reporting requirements that were put in last year's policy. So what we do is on an annual basis, the developers who utilize this tool have to report and show their work that they have set aside the required number of affordable units and have income qualified those residents who are living there. And then that is a report we then turn around and provide to council on an annual basis. But it's also something we use to look at when we will go to update the policy again in 2025. What worked and what didn't work. So we'll continue to do that and utilize that to make sure we are accomplishing our goals of building more units and providing affordability in that hopefully increased number of units being built. And something the council president said earlier about his discussion with Austin, and my colleague Erin Prosser, who unfortunately wasn't able to join us today, and sends her regards, but she points out often that we're never going to go backwards on housing costs. It's really important that we plateau it, and the different tools that we're putting forward as a city are really important to help kind of get that plateau. And back in the day, we talked in COVID, we talked about flattening the curve. This is what we want to do on the housing costs too, and having more units available, being built and available, is going to be a critical factor in that.
Director, could you, just so we rip that Band-Aid off really quickly, does the recipient of a tax abatement not pay any taxes?
Thank you, Chair Favor. That's a great clarification. They pay taxes. They pay taxes on the land value. They pay taxes on what was the appraised value prior to the project going in place. What will be abated will be the incremental increase on the property value and the taxes associated with that as part of the project to build the units.
So I'm not a developer, I'm just a homeowner on the Near East Side of Columbus. Could someone like me qualify for an incentive?
I'm going to actually put my colleague on the spot because this is one I want to make sure I've got the details right on.
Good afternoon, Chair Favor. It would depend on the type of work that's done, but yes, if an individual homeowner is making a rehab, then yes, they are eligible.
Thank you for that. And Director or Deputy Director, could you tell us the department's plan to engage with residents throughout this process?
So we are moving forward with an engagement on key stakeholders, and through this process and through the media, we are putting out this map update and sharing with them. And I know that my colleague, Erin Prosser, who's our Housing Strategies Assistant Director, has reached out to not only stakeholders, but community advocates as well, and spending time with them and walking them through a very similar presentation to what I gave you earlier.
Wonderful. And do we have an idea of when we can expect to see this brought to City Council for a vote?
We're prepared to move legislation that updates the map in December and have it available for council to put on the agenda on the December 4th and December 11th.
Thank you. Council President, do you have any additional questions? Well, thank you, Director, Deputy Director, for that presentation, as well as Council President Hardin for working to lead this effort. Once again, I think that this conversation highlights the need for the City of Columbus to continue to utilize all the tools in the box, that there isn't one tool that's going to save us, if you will. The expansion of the CRA policy is one that really delves into housing equity and making sure that folks have access to housing, affordable housing all across the City of Columbus, while also ensuring that permanent supportive projects or projects that are affordable throughout the entire project also can be built throughout the City of Columbus, once again, eliminating the notion of concentrating poverty in certain areas. But if today's hearing does anything, it should provide some level of comfort that we're not putting all of our eggs in one basket to solve our housing, homelessness, or eviction crisis in Columbus, that we're utilizing all tools that are at our disposal to meet the moment and address the urgency that's before us. So if there are no further questions from my colleagues, I will open it up for public testimony. We do have 8 speakers that will be providing testimony this afternoon. Just a reminder to please state your name and any organization that you might represent. You have 3 minutes. There will be a respectable ding that will let you know when your time has come to completion. The first up is Noelle Williams, followed by Leah Evans. Good afternoon and welcome back to council.
Thank you. Good afternoon, honorable council members. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Noelle Williams, and I'm a leader of the Housing Committee of the BREAD organization. Thank you for inviting us here today. We are disappointed that none of you attended the event that you were invited to attend that took place on last Monday, November the 13th. FYI, you were originally invited back in September of this year. We had nearly 500 community residents at that event. Hundreds of them have stories about how they or loved ones are impacted by the lack of affordable housing. We know that City Council's meeting on that night ended approximately about 7 p.m. It takes approximately 11 minutes to get to Christ the King Catholic Church, where our community event was held. With these facts in mind, how do you think our members, many who are your constituents, felt? How do you think those who are struggling to afford housing felt that night? Again, many are your constituents. Many of us, our members, your constituents, were left wondering, why didn't anyone from council show up? And specifically, where is Council Member Favor? You want BREAD support on your housing agenda, and we, BREAD, also need your support. Let me say, the housing initiatives that you are discussing today are wonderful. They're good. However, there's an opportunity for great. The city has a unique opportunity for a big investment into affordable housing with the American Rescue Plan dollars. This could help thousands of families. This council still has time to advocate for rescue plan money to be dedicated to building affordable housing for people earning $30,000 or less. We want to publicly invite you to attend our 2023 Nehemiah Action on May the 21st at 7 p.m. at the Ohio State Fairgrounds. An invitation was emailed to your staff today, along with photos of our large community event on last Monday. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you and continuing your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Noel. Next, we have Leah Evans.
I'll say
followed-
something. I'll say something.
Yes, please.
Sorry, I'm just
Sorry,
taking
Council
it.
President.
Yeah. Is the May 21st event, is that a Monday as well? And I appreciate you bringing up last Monday's event. I mean, what we have to do, what I appreciate Chair Favor for so much is that she encourages his council and the departments to meet with everybody, folks that have the same agendas as we do around housing, and folks who have different, and certainly folks who have different tactics. And I think that the relationship that has been fostered between BRED and council is stronger because of Councilmember Favor's engagement. And so I just want us to be careful about saying, if you don't do X right here at this one particular time, then maybe there's some unalignment. We have so much that we agree on, and this council appreciates the advocacy that BRED has, and certainly the relationship that we have with the individual members of BRED and the churches and the parishioners of the BRED organization. But I just want us to continue to be focused on the work and maybe not certain the tactics, because as you said, because I was wondering if you had a pushback on any specific legislation that we talked about today, and it didn't seem like that, but it was about us not attending a meeting after a pretty contentious council meeting last Monday. So I just want to put a little nudge back to our friend that we're going to be focused on the outcomes, not the tactic. That's just from my standpoint.
Thank you, Council President. Next, we have Leah Evans, followed by Aaron McDaniel. Welcome back to council.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council President Hardin, Chair Favor, and honorable council members. My name is Leah Evans. I'm the president and CEO of Homeport. I am pleased and proud to be here and taking an opportunity to share Homeport's experience with one of the most successful tools that we've seen in our city to advance housing and housing affordability, the Real Estate Tax Abatement Program. As a mission-driven nonprofit developer of housing, building homes throughout the city, we are challenged with limited rents but unlimited costs. We have been the recipient of real estate tax abatements for rental homes and apartments and for our work with for-sale homes. In the past 3 years alone, in our 3 rental communities, we've brought online 206 affordable apartments due to this tool. In our rental work, we've seen the tax abatement tool be a go or no-go decision maker for development. Lowering the real estate tax liability is a direct dollar impact on the operating cost of a property, allowing us to maintain below market rents and bring affordable housing online. Also, the long-term nature of the tax abatement allows us to develop budgets that support lower rents while meeting expenses and maintaining the properties. The CRA program provides predictability that weathers market variances and the uncertainty of ongoing costs that we are all experiencing today. In our for-sale work, the ability to provide a real estate tax abatement to future homeowners has a dramatic impact on the affordability of homeownership, allowing more buyers to qualify for mortgages and purchase homes in a highly competitive market with rapidly increasing sales prices. The abatement serves the same purpose of reducing the monthly expenses of the homeowner in order to allow them to purchase and support their sustained ownership. Since 2020, we have sold 14 homes to homeowners making under 120% of the area median income using this tool. The real estate tax abatement has had a positive impact on our ability to develop new housing and advance affordability. In areas where it's unavailable, we have been challenged to find other sources of equity or subsidy or cost reduction that will allow us to bring projects online and offer the more broadly affordable rents that we need to working people. Considerations for expansion should continue to work in the city's policy initiative areas to advance not only housing, but also promote equity, economic mobility, support public investments, and protect our treasured community assets. I thank you for your partnership and your consideration of this expansion as we continue to work with the team at the Department of Development. Director Stevens and the Housing Division has been tremendous partners for continuing our work. And we thank you for being a council that's committed to being a city where everyone has a home. Thank you.
President Evans, I have a question for you. Thank you for your testimony. I think in our conversations around tax incentives, we tend to always center for-profit developers, and we don't do enough to center nonprofit developers and how incredibly important it is for you all to utilize the resource that is the tax incentive in a capital stack along with LIHTC funding and other resources. Can you talk about how incredibly important, especially it is right now in today's economic environment, to be able to rely on both?
Thank you, Chair Faber. That's a really good point. One of the things that is most challenging for us is that as we design these projects, they are designed to be affordable for 15 years. And that means that we're limited on those rents while expenses can vary from year to year to year. And so being able to be consistent on knowing how much we're going to have to invest on the front end in order to maintain the property. And again, with a group like ours, also to pay for the services for the residents at that property. So that's a layer of our delivery of service that comes with our housing that doesn't have a revenue source to pay for it. And so often those resources have to come from the property. They have to come from the cash flow from all of our properties, and being able to use that to invest right back into the neighborhood, right back into the property, and invest right back into those residents is key. And again, bringing those operating costs, that's the day-to-day cost to run the property, down helps us to be able to do that and then keep those properties at a level of quality. Obviously, the conversation starting around something like a colonial village, you don't ever want to have to get there because the property is affordable. So you have to be really smart about those investments and having these tools on the front end, just, along with the tax credits, along with home funds, along with the tax abatement, allow us to make those commitments to that long-term affordability.
Thank you very much. Are there any additional questions? Yes.
I just want to underscore what you said, Madam President, and one commend Homeport because of that word that you said, quality. And my question is a simple one, but also I'm making light of it, but is there a affordable 2x4 section at Lowe's?
No, not yet.
No. And I say that to folks because I want folks to understand that whether it's affordable housing, subsidized, market rate, job ready, workforce housing, whatever word you want to put, the cost of construction is the cost of construction. So whether it is our nonprofit partners like Homeport, that is providing wraparound services and additional services to some of our most vulnerable folks, to folks that are emerging developers who are trying to help build our city of tomorrow. The cost of construction is the cost of construction.
Yep.
And the only way that we can get around that as a city, one of the tools that we have are the tools that we're talking about today. So I just wanted to make sure I underscored that we want quality, affordable housing for our residents.
Can I just add one more thing?
Please.
Is that, again, I think the reason that the expansion makes so much sense is because we want a variety of housing across a variety of geographies. We want to be reinvesting in our areas that have been underinvested in historically. We want to see those areas, but we also want to be in areas where we know where jobs are, we know where transportation are, we know where services are. So I think that this parity that we want to bring to the development experience, that you can have housing at different income levels, at different styles, different varieties of housing across our geography, it's important to have the tools that do that aren't just specific to one type of product or specific to one type of demographic.
Absolutely. Thank you, President. And next we have Aaron McDaniel, who will be followed by Ana Maria Perales-Lang. Welcome back to Council.
Good afternoon. How are you, Chair? How are you, honorable members of City Council? My name is Aaron McDaniel, and I stand before you today as an emerging developer, small business owner in the real estate space, but also as a community change agent, invested in the growth and transformation of our beloved city, Columbus, Ohio. As a principal of Blueprint Development Company, my team and I have actively engaged in projects that aim not only to reshape skylines, but also, more importantly, to enhance the fabric of our neighborhoods. So today I'm here to shed light on a critical aspect of development, the financial challenges that often determine whether a project soars or stumbles. You see, I understand this closely because my recent project, the Sabriel, an affordable project with 27 units, was teetering on the edge of feasibility and was a recipient of a tax abatement. Without the support of that Near East area tax abatement, the project simply would not have financially worked. And the truth is that financial intricacies with development projects are a delicate dance, and the availability of tax abatements can be the decisive step that ensures the music doesn't stop. So for projects like Sabriel, the margins are tight, and the financial viability is often hanging in the balance. It's not just about bricks and mortar, it's about creating homes for our community members, homes that are not just structures, but gateways to a better life. The expansion of the citywide tax abatement is not just a policy shift, it's a lifeline for projects. The financial burden of development can be immense, with costs ranging from land acquisition and construction to navigating the complexities of zoning and compliance. And without the incentive provided by the abatement, the financial equation becomes precarious, and the dream of providing attainable housing for our community could easily turn into an unfeasible challenge. One of the things I want to highlight is how banks also underwrite these projects. And what they identify is a minimum standard of a 1.2 debt service coverage ratio, or DSCR as they say it, which means that if your total debts for the year are $1, that project needs to produce $1.20. And so that may have been what that map was referencing when it was looking at the feasibility of projects, the really red map, and then with the incentives, the map that included some of the yellow and green. So we're asking for the opportunity to make projects like Sabriel a reality. The financial support provided by the citywide tax abatement is not a mere convenience. It's the difference between breaking ground and breaking hearts. It's the assurance that our commitment to affordable housing and community development can materialize into tangible, lasting change. So finally, I just want to encourage each of you to recognize the financial tightrope that developers walk, especially when striving to create projects that serve for the greater good. The expansion of the citywide abatements isn't just about dollars and cents, it's about enabling us as community change agents to turn dreams into addresses, to build homes that resonate with the heartbeat of our neighborhoods. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. McDaniels. Do my colleagues have any questions or comments?
I just have one question, because I know we just heard from one of our nonprofit developers. Mr. McDaniel, I think that you have set a tone, and especially the Near East Side, of wanting to think about putting neighbors first and wanting to be affordable, which is to be commended. But from a business standpoint, would you be able to make, say, your newest project work without any kind of incentive or some of these tools that we're talking about and financing opportunities that are available through the public?
Yeah, the answer is, unequivocally no. When we were working on the Sabriel project, they do an appraisal when you're going for your financing. And part of the value, the to-be-built value, included a significant portion for the value of the abatement, the money that we would be saving not in paying taxes for the next 15 years. So it's literally, really what I tried to emphasize, it's make or break when it comes to these projects. Without it, it doesn't work. With it, it's a feasible project.
Right, and the project potentially gets done, right, but not at the rents that are achievable for folks that have called the Near East Side home for decades.
No, I think the project doesn't get done. Without the abatement, even with market rates, you're losing money. You're paying to own a project. So that's how important that this is. So I think the expansion helps to open up to other opportunity-rich areas for emerging developers like myself, as well as large developers, and really help address the housing need. So I think it's really important, and happy to speak on the behalf of it.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
And I will also just uplift the program that Mr. McDaniel spoke of, the Emerging Developers Program, which my colleagues have been supportive of as well, which is really this notion of bringing more chairs to the table. When you think about traditional developers, and they generally don't tend to look like me. And so through the leadership of the Affordable Housing Trust, which is a trusted partner with the City of Columbus and Franklin County, and ensuring that we are supporting affordable housing development in our community. The new president has created a program that helps to support developers that were already doing work in our community, but did not have access to all of the tools in that developing toolbox. So access to capital, access to connections, access to land, at equitable prices. So very excited. I believe we're on the second cohort now, and Mr. McDaniels was part of the first cohort. And as you've heard, he's completed his first project on the Near East Side, which I believe was 27 units. All right, next we have Anna Maria Perales-Lang, followed by Michael Wilkos. Welcome back to council.
Hello, honorable council people. I hear it, I am the werewolf. So I just wanted to address the council because I know everything you're saying is great in regards to developers, but then there is us, and your focus is always on evictions. And I only got 3 minutes, so I'm gonna make it real quick. I think some of the things that you are putting in are very, very good and help everyone. However, thank you, Councilman Blankston, for remembering that we are also part of the city. We are also taxpayers. And as landlords, we are not always the bad guys. We work very hard, I know I do, very, very hard to provide housing for people that otherwise would not have it. I work with a lot of different organizations, and it is very difficult when landlords do not have no advocates for them, okay? So here's me saying, I think a lot what you're doing is very good. I'm not 100% in favor of some of it, but I believe the greater good, and I understand it. However, two of the things that you mentioned, giving 6 months notice, while we can do that, that's fair. It's not fair, but I can understand where you're coming from, trying to give people an opportunity to find places and but also remember, we are a business, and like everybody else, we were affected very, very much by COVID. And we are still taking the hit. And we are taking our hits because our source of income is rents. And we are the only ones where we have to apologize for being paid. And it is very sad that you provide lots of incentives and lots of programs and attorneys, and you even want to have a center. But there is no center for us. And I think maybe you ought to think that we are, at the end of the day, the people that are housing people. And to stay in business, if we do not do it, we are not a nonprofit. We are business. You do it for profit. We don't have to get carried away. That I understand. But it really upsets me when I have reached out to you all for help in regards to keeping people. You can't even answer an email. So I will do what I have to help my residents. But more importantly, my allegiance stands with the owner, and for what I do, that I'm very proud of doing, and think that when you are doing your center, you might want to have an area for landlords to go to for resources, because we're all in this together. And as long as the landlords are kept out, this will not succeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna Maria. And as I have said to you privately and publicly, that we recognize that our landlords are a part of our solution, just as well as our realtors in our community, and we need to continue to work collectively to address what we are experiencing, the pressures that we're experiencing, in our community. But this is part of the process for me as chair of this committee, to continue to create spaces for engagement, for ideating on ways in which we can provide solutions not just to tenants, not to renters, but also to developers, realtors, and landlords as well. And so if you have ideas, I ask once again to continue to submit said ideas to us so that we can begin to do research on them and put some work behind them. Councilmember Rosa de Padilla.
I just wanted to say to Ana Maria, who is a leader in the Latino community and who as a manager of director. I was going to say as a manager or as the director who manages a apartment complex or several properties, what I wanted to say is I think that your outreach is extraordinary and not one that is common in all places. And so the unfortunate truth is that a lot of the protections that we put in is for the folks who are not and do not have the heart of service that you might have or who function in the way that you do. And so I want to acknowledge that because both of those truths you have to create equity within the system. And the way that you create equity within the system is the policies that we have. And they're not meant to be detrimental to good landlords. It's meant to protect people, which is something that I think we all want to do. The unfortunate consequence of that is that there are bad actors who make it difficult for all of us. And so that's just something for us to remember, because I do want to uplift what Councilmember Favor said, is that how we work together and how we all add to this in a way that is productive for all of our people, because that's what we care about at the end of the day, is important. And that means that there's compromises on all ends for all people as we come to the table to figure out how we do best for our families and for our folks in the city. So I just wanted to just acknowledge that and say thank you, and just again say thank you to Councilmember Favor for bringing folks all to the table. And you're always a friend of this council, and your opinion is always valued. So, thank you.
Welcome back to council, Michael Wilkos.
Great. Thank you, Committee Chair Favor and Council Members Bankston and Broso de Padilla. My name is Michael Wilkos, and I'm Senior Vice President of United Way of Central Ohio. We invest in more than 90 nonprofit organizations in our community that support people at 200% of the federal poverty level and below. That would be a single individual who lives on about $24,000 a year. The nonprofit sector in Columbus employs tens of thousands of people who every day are serving those to help them meet their full potential, but the housing shortage of Central Ohio is causing their jobs to be much more difficult. As recently as 2010, Central Ohio had 107 housing units for every 100 households, a fairly healthy market, giving consumers choice by price and location. By 2020, we were down to just 102 housing units for every 100 households. And if we do not substantially increase construction of more housing, by 2030, we may have just 96 housing units for every 100 households, creating a very strained housing market like we see in places like Austin and Denver. This current scarcity of housing has resulted in the average rent on a two-bedroom apartment increasing by 56% in Columbus since 2016. I want to share two examples of how the high housing costs are impacting two Columbus neighborhoods. In Linden, the number of people living in that community jumped 7%, but the number of households or housing units fell by 4% during the last 10 years. And in Northland, the population of that neighborhood jumped by 13,700 more people, but only 484 additional housing units were added. If housing costs are jumping faster than incomes, one way to compensate for this trend is to simply have a lot more people living in a housing unit, and that's what's happening across our city. Even nonprofit staff who are placing families in housing are really seeing those clients again just 12 months later for needed services. This is not due to non-payment, but because landlords are choosing to respond to this housing shortage by increasing rents and choosing to upgrade units. This is causing further displacement across urban neighborhoods. Nonprofits that we invest in are also reporting the difficult their own staff who rent are having in difficulty finding housing as rents are going up. Number of them are reporting a high percentage of their own staff move every 12 months to avoid these increases. And lastly, some nonprofits are reporting they're offering jobs to recent college graduates who turned those jobs down because they cannot move to Columbus to afford those rents. As you stated earlier, the Continuum of Care reported that the number of people experiencing homelessness has jumped over 20% across the city, but those living on the land unsheltered is up 46%. From working families to nonprofit staff to those who are at the lowest end of the economic spectrum, the housing shortage is impacting tens of thousands of our neighbors. We must increase housing options in Central Ohio, and I support the efforts of council and the administration to remove housing barrier production and to increase occupancy across our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkos. We can always count on you to level set and ground the conversation, and thank you for the work that you continue to do in our community.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have Rosaline Mabe. I apologize if I mispronounced, followed by Lucy Wolf, and then our last but certainly not least, Sarah Jane Steffs. Welcome to council.
Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, council members. About me, I am a private investor and a Northeast Area Commissioner under the City of Columbus. I'm also a member of 2 local real estate investor associations, a designated Ohio professional housing provider under the National Real Estate Investors Association, and I'm also a 20-year Section 8 housing provider. So I understand and I do applaud very much your initiatives. However, I do have a few concerns. The first one being, when I look through the initiatives, I do wonder, who is holding tenants accountable? It seems like a lot of the responsibility does fall on the landlords. And like someone prior said, this is a concern because I think in society there is a misconception that most landowners belong to a wealthy class. I want to remind everyone here today that by far and large, most landowners, property owners in America, own just 1 or 2 properties, and we were very severely affected by the eviction moratorium. So that is a big concern for us. The second concern I have is this city council took the steps to pass an ordinance making source of income a protected class. And that was a good initiative. As I said, I am a Section 8 landlord. However, we're working with CGI, which is a partner of CMHA. They seem to be a power unto themselves. We've had tenants sleeping in cars. Landlords owed thousands of dollars in rents, unpaid rents, and just no resolution to the issues that tenants and landlords are facing. So this is a very big concern for us, and we are wondering why would CGI, which is supposed to be a partner in the community to solve the housing crisis, be allowed to function as a chokehold in the system? That is a huge concern for a lot of investors. And the third and last point I'd like to bring to your attention, as I went through the initiatives of this city council, I was seeing that preserving existing stock of housing is a huge goal of this city council. But what I'm wondering is what is being done to stabilize older multifamily communities, for instance, condominium communities. While condominium communities have the privilege and by Ohio law to assess owners, we have quite a few communities, for instance, in North Columbus, that are older. And the one that I'm speaking about specifically has numerous code violations to the tune of $1 million. We've reached out to the city. We cannot put the burden back on the owners because it would cause homelessness among the seniors and low-income owners. Thank you for your consideration. These are my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rosaline, for your testimony, and more importantly, for some of the issues that you highlighted today. I will have a member of my office circle back around to get some additional information, specifically around CGI and your concerns around putting a chokehold in the process, as well as initiatives that can be put in place to support tenants as well. Next, we have Lucy Wolf, and that will be followed by our last speaker for the afternoon, Sarah Jane Steffs. Welcome back to council.
Good afternoon, members of council. Chair Faber. My name's Lucy Wolf. I've been a licensed realtor in the state of Ohio for 15 years. I've worked predominantly in the city, central city areas. I want to address the issue with wholesaling properties because, number one, wholesaling is very predatory. The seller is sometimes told that they could make more money without using a licensed agent, even though they're really not. They're lowballing, the wholesalers are lowballing the sellers and then selling it off to a buyer unsuspecting at a much higher price. Wholesalers take the cut of the money and closing costs are paid by seller and buyer. So this is very predatory in that say. They take away, they're also taking a large portion of the bread and butter homes that we really, really need. And that just cuts a lot of people out by doing that. The other issue, sometimes they buy and hold, and the buying and holding, they end up getting calls from code enforcement when they're not taking care of their property or maintaining it at any cost. They've used addendums where they tell they assign the contracts over to someone else and the person's willing to pay more. However, sometimes in addendums that I've seen with investment realtors, they even have the seller sign the document saying they recognize that the property is below market value, which is 9 times out of 10 a fallacy in itself as well. So the other thing that I think should be addressed is these investors that have become licensed agents because they're accessing the MLS, which is supposed to be confidential information, and then they're marketing. Some even licensed realtors are marketing wholesale properties, but not even disclosing that they are licensed agents. So the truth in advertising is being violated in that case. So I don't know what your regulations are going to be, but it's possible title companies could have a special fee at wholesale closing if they realize that it's a wholesale closing. Other than that, like I said, it really, really needs to be addressed.
Thank you so much for your testimony this afternoon. I know that Council President's legislative aide is still in chambers with us now and was probably vigorously taking notes. So that was really helpful information. Definitely want to circle back around on those ideas.
Great. Thanks.
And last but certainly not least, Sarah Jane Steffs. Welcome to Council.
Chair Faber, Councilmember Dorans, thanks so much for having me today. My name is Sarah Jane Steffes. I am with National Church Residences. Headquartered here in Central Ohio, National Church Residences is the nation's largest nonprofit owner of affordable senior housing. In the city of Columbus alone, we have developed, owned, and operate over 25 senior and permanent supportive housing communities. We touch the lives of nearly 5,000 City of Columbus residents each day. As we know, the need for additional affordable housing in Columbus is significant. The Affordable Housing Alliance of Central Ohio recently released a research report titled Finding Home in the Heart of It All, which confirmed that over 54,000 Franklin County households paid more than half of their income toward housing costs. The report indicates we've made strides, reducing the amount of cost-burdened households by 4% in the past 5 years. However, it also predicts that if we maintain our current pace, that number could increase by 10,000 additional households by 2040. The report goes on to examine what would happen if we reduced the amount of cost-burdened residents by half. The answers are compelling. If we reduce the number of cost-burdened households by half, we could add 5.5 years of additional life expectancy to our region. We could reduce the number of food-insecure households by 5,000. And we could reduce the number of seniors rationing their medication by 2,500. National Church Residences is working diligently to answer this call, In the last 2 years, we've added or are adding over 650 units of affordable senior housing in the city of Columbus in 8 newly constructed communities for a total of $110 million in construction costs. Each of these communities has benefited from a City of Columbus residential tax abatement. Without the city's residential tax abatement, I can say with confidence, we would not have the momentum of adding over 650 new units in the city alone. The tax abatement allows us to provide housing that is affordable to residents we serve while maintaining the building to ensure that it's an asset to the community for years to come. As you know, residential abatements are available through the community reinvestment areas, and as of today, only certain areas are qualified. National Church Residences has worked with the City of Columbus to create CRAs for most of the new communities in the city that we've built. In our experience, it has taken 6 to 9 months to create each new CRA, and that's before we ever get it to any project-specific process. The need for more housing is great. The ability to build affordable housing presents many barriers. In order to meet the demand, we need to examine how to eliminate these barriers. National Church Residences applauds the city's leadership in reducing these barriers through the housing strategy and supports the department's proposal for geographically expanding the residential tax abatement. Simply put, with these changes, we'll be able to increase the speed in which we tackle this housing crisis, and we can simply build more and build more faster.
Thank you, and I could not think of a more perfect way to end the conversation today because what we have been saying but not saying out loud is the sense of urgency in which we need to institute all of these policies that we're talking about here today because someone in our community needs housing right now. So thank you for the work that your organization does every day to support our aging residents in Columbus and Franklin County. Thank you to my colleagues, Council President Hardin, Council President Pro Tem Dorans, Councilmember Bankston, and Barroso de Padilla for being here today and sharing updates. And thank you to Director Stevens and Deputy Director Jones, as well as all of our community members to be here in the afternoon. I want to ensure all of our residents and community members here with us today or listening online that we do not take housing and our region's housing crisis lightly. As I have said many times before, we cannot fix this housing crisis with one policy. We need to be intentional about making changes to our zoning, protecting the affordability we have, and being creative about adding more housing stock in our city. Additionally, it is important to acknowledge the reality of systemic racism, the complex interaction of policies, procedures, laws, and institutions that have created disparities in housing. The reality is that housing insecurity is not evenly distributed across the population. Whether we are talking about evictions, homelessness, or poverty, housing insecurity disproportionately affects people of color, older adults, the disabled, and low-income wage earners. We need to take a holistic, comprehensive approach to understand the needs of our community to properly address the housing crisis. I invite you all to continue to stay engaged with council, offices, and with the Department of Development to share your ideas and stay updated on the initiatives you have heard today. I'd also like to take a moment to remind everyone about housingforallcbus.com, where you can find information on these initiatives as well as others, and rentful614.com, which serves as the rental assistance hub for tenants and landlords. Finally, I'd like to thank my staff as well as our team here at City Hall for helping us with our technology and streaming, Mark Carter, as well as the team at CTV, my legislative aide, Sindipti Jindal, my legislative assistant, Kendra Isidu, as well as my intern, Tyler Littlejohn. Thank you all for your work here today. This will now conclude our hearing.